Cole Howard.
Arkansas.
Brett Leach.
Illinois, Doug McLean. Indiana.
Adam Phelps.
Iowa.
Warren Jones.
Kentucky.
John Brunges.
Louisiana.
Jason Olzak.
Manitoba.
Jillian St. George.
Michigan.
Callie Rush.
Minnesota.
Nate Huck.
Mississippi.
Houston Havens.
Missouri.
Reed Vigoot.
Ohio.
Mike Irvin.
Ontario.
Rod Brook.
Saskatchewan. Tennessee.
Jamie Fedderson.
Wisconsin.
Taylor Finger.
Canadian Wildlife Service. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Dave Scott.
Bird Banding Laboratory. USDA APHIS Wildlife Services.
Lee Humbert.
USGS. All set?
All right. Frank is not on, but he did, both him and Chris Sharp gave me some updates. So I don't know if I can give those, and then I'll let Dave speak on behalf of the Fish and Wildlife Service. Here's what I got from Frank. They're at a CWS Waterfowl Tech meeting. Ontario region will not be conducting the Southern Ontario Waterfowl Plot Survey this year, and there are also reductions planned for the Eastern Waterfowl Survey. The traditional survey area will run as per usual. No changes are expected at this time. The Prairie region got their budget recently, and waterfowl programs, BPOP, honker banding, Arctic goose banding, duck banding, age ratio surveys, HPAI surveillance are all expected to operate at levels similar to last year. The prairies have been getting some moisture recently, and habitat conditions are continuing to improve. The spring conservation season for temperate nesting Canada geese in southern Manitoba ended on April 10th. It was a fairly late spring, and low participation and harvest rates are expected. Mid-continent light geese have arrived on the prairies, and we are already seeing some mortality, most likely related to HPAI. You can reach out to Frank. He did send a image of the percent average precipitation, so I'll drop that in the chat. Chris Sharp said that they're still waiting for their final budget to settle, but this is what they anticipate at the moment. That EWS planned with potential reduction in effort. The temperate breeding Canada goose banding is likely not going to happen. Southern Hudson Bay population Canada goose banding is planned with MNR. HPAI surveillance is likely going to be in the fall and winter. Duck banding is planned, but with potential reduction in effort. And then sandhill crane staging surveys are planned. So that is what I have from Canadian folks. I can't answer any questions. Maybe Rod can. All right, Dave, we'll kick it to you.
Okay, thanks, Taylor. I'll touch on a few things. I know got some of these things we'll talk about on our agenda, but first off, budget. So when we had the flyway, we were still waiting to finalize some things, and recently learned that we will be funding all the normal things that we've done in the past, which includes the Canada Goose contract with the flyway. So I'll be able to process here May, June timeframe. So I'll work with Jamie when the time comes. But that's all good, at least for this year. Surveys are planned, despite some rumors to the contrary on this 3-year process. Annual surveys are still planned as part of the monitoring. And specifically for BPOP this year, Mark Conniff and the various crews are making good progress going through the new process we have for international travel and getting all their travel in order. I don't think they're done yet, but I think they're making good progress towards that for next month. And Cooper, I know, participates, so I assume he hasn't heard anything else contrary to that. All right. At the North American, which we'll talk more specifically about, but there were lots of conversations about the policy memo process and what options we were going to be pursuing. I gave my presentation like all the flyway reps did to their various councils, and then there were hallway conversations and a director's roundtable. And Tommy Tuma, the assistant secretary from Louisiana, came to the second MFC meeting and shared with folks that the director said his intent was in this 3-year memo process was to be able to ratchet up or ratchet down, those were his words, on an annual basis. So when we got back from the North American, that message was passed on to Jerome and others to update the information that we had in the policy memo that was going back and forth and being reviewed by OIRA. And I know there's been passbacks and questions between OIRA and the service. Currently, I believe the latest version sits in the director's office. There were some plans made for the direct to final if we needed it, but so far it seems like the intention is to push through with the normal policy, memo with a proposed rule and then comment period and a final rule. So, but nothing has published yet. So I'll keep you posted, but that's where we are. That's the process. And at least was reassuring to those of us who wanted to make sure we could make optimal decisions on an annual basis that the director agreed to that portion of it. The 3-year thing still remains. We had Harvest Management Working Group meeting right before the North American in Phoenix, and I'm sure that JB and Adam can touch on that, but it was productive in terms of laying out some examples of alternatives that met the means objectives that the flyways had identified through the task force. And then that was presented last week to the task force. And I think there was a good conversation. I think they were pleasantly pleased at the work that has been accomplished. And I think they're starting to realize how much more work has to be done. So the individual flyways, representatives like Adam and JB from Harvest Management Working Group need to talk with Shannon and Luke. Hopefully I'll be included in that process, and that we're doing that through all the flyways to kind of review where we are. Is there anything that we're missing? Is there any questions they have about the things that have been worked on so far and those alternatives and, next steps? Hopefully we do that with the Fish and Wildlife Service representatives, Will Meeks and Jerome also before the next meeting, which is in May. I think the last thing that I'll mention is that we are in the season selection process with the forms. I haven't heard from all of you in terms of getting drafts back for me to review. I've heard from most of you, but if you haven't, please send me your stuff to look at soon. 3 states have signed off and finalized their stuff. I appreciate getting those, but again, May 1st is coming, so let's keep making progress on those if you can. And if you have an issue where it's not going to get done, reach out and let me know. So I can take any questions, or, we can pass them on to Cooper since he's here.
You did a great job, Dave.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.
It's also in the
JB.
chat. That's just the map that Frank sent. Okay.
Yep. All right. I think that covers, Dave, what you and I had discussed in terms of some of the topics. I know we'll touch base on some of the rocket propellant stuff later. We had
That was the only other thing that was different.
Right.
But Reed can touch on that when we talk about it.
Perfect. We had the season setting policy memo as the next topic. I know, Dave, you covered it pretty well. John, is there anything that you want to add based on your attendance at the North American?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll say that
Dave mentioned Will Meeks showed up for the council meeting, and he spoke very candidly and was a very nice kind of addition to the council meeting. I think that he indicated that he has the opportunity to speak with the director, and he heard what council said loud and clear, and so I feel really good that he's kind of a voice for us inside, and I think was a positive thing. But beyond that, I think Dave covered it all. Yeah, we still just wait and see, I guess. So again, what does the language actually? Again, I think they've said now that okay, we're going to go up or down, but what does that truly mean? What does it look like? Are we, locked in? No new opportunities for 3 years. No new what? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what it all means.
John, yeah, I know my council member expressed concern with this process in that sandhill crane season, if Wisconsin were to try to get a sandhill crane season, would we then have to wait until the end of a 3-year process? I already know that our process takes almost 2 years to get through, so it's not like it's a crazy thing on that end. But when I talk to legislators on my end and say, oh yeah, even if you guys were to pass a bill, it's not, in 2027, it wouldn't be until 2030 at the earliest. I don't know the reaction that we would have.
That's one of the potential risks. If you time it just slightly wrong, you could be waiting 3, 4, 5 years before you could initiate that new season.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Or you
talked
could
about that at council a little bit, but we don't have all the answers. And yeah, it's fortunately for Wisconsin, I don't know how quickly you're going to actually have the season passed anyways.
Yeah, it didn't pass the Senate, so it has to start all over again in January of 27. So
the challenge is, though, that if they ever do come to a point where they get it through, then you are hit with this other massive hurdle, and it again creates the government will fix it, the politicians will fix it if the biologists can't do it. So that's anyway, we'll see how it goes. But there were, again, Louisiana, where Jason's hiding there somewhere, I don't see him, but he's Louisiana certainly has a lot to lose if this thing goes to a emergency thing. Texas also was in the same boat that they've got. Their words were, "We're hunting doves on September 1st, no matter what." So there's a couple of things that are pretty big changes that if we don't get this memo policy through, it could be ugly.
yeah.
We didn't really put on here the council meeting. So are you okay if I just jump in and just kind of quickly mention Warren and Dave jump in if I mess up anything? I think the council meeting went very well. I felt like they were really engaged and really, everybody was asking lots of questions. Taylor, you mentioned your council member is new, and he was immediately involved and jumped in and asking questions. And they asked me lots of questions, and some of them I wasn't entirely sure of the answer to, but fortunately, Orrin saved me on a couple. So, but it was I thought really good. They approved all of our recommendations with the exception of the money to go to the North American Duck Symposium. And that one surprised me. Luke, if I remember right, Orrin, it was Luke jumped on it and just, once he started, it was dead. It really, Ben, my council member, kind of jumped on it, and then it was, and then I had not talked to Ben about it at all. I had not had any discussion about it. And so it was pretty quickly that they unanimously opposed it. And a letter has been sent to the symposium asking them in the future to take working biologists into consideration when they plan the meetings. And so we'll see what comes of it. Warren, did anything else exciting happen? Again, to me, one of the best best things was to have kind of the beginning to have, for probably the first half of the meeting was having, oh gosh, all of a sudden I forgot, Fish and Wildlife Service,
Bill Meeks.
Will there for a bunch of it. So he was a very, again, great participant and very active. So
Yeah, and so everybody knows, Will currently is planning on coming to Iowa for at least the council portion. So we'll probably have a visit by Will in September also.
I agree with your observations, JB. I thought it was a great council meeting, lots of engagement and discussion from a diversity of council members. I thought you did a great job representing the tech section and everything went well. I'm still kind of working on things on my end. I appreciate everybody's patience. Hope to get the final couple letters out this week and the final regulations or the final packets put together this week as well.
Cooper.
Yeah, I just had similar thing happen in the Central Flyway meeting at the North American. Matt Hogan, regional director from Region 6, actually sat in on our council meeting for the morning and heard the concerns with the memo process and everything. And, I think is supportive of where the states are at on this too. So I'm sure he's been talking to the director and others as well. So it was good. I think it's the first time in any flyway meeting I've had a regional director sit in, so that's good that they're taking notice.
It went all, I think, a pretty good process. I mean, a pretty good meeting is, at least in my mind.
Go ahead, Nate.
There was I'll say one other thing before you, there is concern in council a little bit about spending and how, every time you've been there, that when a new project or new money issue comes along, they start to ask questions a little bit. The one other thing that they did, they passed the SCULP recommendation based on a promise that the Central Flyway passes it. So it's pending the Central Flyway also passing it, which I don't know. I think everybody knows the Central Flyway deferred to wait till September to make a decision. And so basically, if they don't approve it in September, then it comes back to us to try to figure out another plan. All right. Sorry about that, Nate. Go ahead, man.
No problem. I was just going to say, I was chatting with Vertiska about something else, and he asked me about the funding, because he was kind of frustrated and felt like they had done their due diligence, and he specifically mentioned that while they did not reach out to Mississippi Flyway, they did, reach out to everybody in the Central Flyway. Everybody said it was good, and he said we thought that was enough. So I just wanted to express that. And he said, yeah, they're kind of scrambling now, trying to find more money. So just an FYI.
And I'll also say I had some problem with it, but afterwards I asked Oren and everybody, like, I hope I didn't bias council in the presentation of it. I really don't believe I did. Luke, I mean, without anything, Luke jumped pretty much on it pretty quickly. So anyway, hopefully I didn't influence them.
You were fair, JB, and it's been communicated to them. I understand that they're trying to make up for somebody else that dropped the ball in terms of the planning, but at the same time, we were all contacted before Ducks 9, and we all had input, and then they scheduled it. And this is not the case this time. So, council made its decision.
Yeah, I agree with your characterization of it. And I would just maybe add this to the same theme of council had a lot of questions about spending money. And so we're going to have to be very careful moving forward about what we approve in terms of funding, because they were very eager to cut funding. And I think this was, while a small part of that, I think that was kind of along that theme.
I will echo that my council member, being relatively new, did fully endorse Oren's at least proposal that we had at one point to prioritize what projects we felt were important, and felt that that would be a very good effort from the technical section to help council identify what projects were important to fund. And so again, I have whole support from my council member that if there is an effort to prioritize the work that we should be funding, that I participate in that.
I was,
And for those of you who haven't had a chance to meet him, I will say that, you know, Sam, the new representative from Wisconsin, was very engaged in, you know, night and day different from Eric. Nothing against Eric, but you didn't often have questions from Eric, and Sam was very engaged. He asked questions, and it was a kind of a breath of fresh air to have council have some of the discussions they had.
some of those folks that have been around a long time like me that were surprised to hear Taylor say, well, if it's important, we should fund the whole thing. That Sam went back to Kent's strategy of no, we're not we're not paying for that. So it was pretty entertaining. Okay.
All right.
I guess the next up, Adam, are you okay? Since we got the guys here to give the presentation, can we swap them up and so they don't have to sit through all of this stuff with us?
Well, since I've missed the last two calls, I'm not gonna have anything to say anyway, so it's completely up to you.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's Mike and Tom, you guys. I can see Tom. I think I saw Mike on the second page here, hiding back there. Everybody, I think, knows Tom pretty well. Do you want to introduce Mike for us?
Yeah, I can introduce Mike. Mike Wells, he's a migratory bird biologist for Region 3 of the Fish and Wildlife Service. And what we're going to talk to you all here today about is some take assessment work we did for eastern population of sandhill cranes. You know, I was around when we the latest plan. I was part of putting that together, and which included starting a hunting season for that population, and working with Jim Kelly, who was the flyway rep at the time. We did put together an EA and did a kind of a back of a napkin PTL assessment of the population at that time to get an idea of what level of take would be sustainable. And so basically, the population has continued to grow, as we all know, and expand in range, and intermixing now with mid-continent birds. A lot of changes have happened, and thought, this is still when I was the regional mig bird chief, we thought it'd be a good idea to update that take assessment with a little more robust analysis using a potential take limit modeling approach. And Mike, I think you were on with mig birds by then. Previously, Mike and I Mike and I had worked on a take assessment for downy and hairy woodpeckers in the eastern U.S. because we issued a lot of depredation permits for them and had no idea of was the level of take we were authorizing sustainable. So he gained some skills with PTL models during that project. And like I said, we were looking to update the take assessment. I know the Flyaway has been talking about potentially updating that management plan too. And so thought it'd be a good time to update that take assessment and bring somebody on that's a lot smarter than me that has better quantitative skills to do that. And I know Jamie and John, you both helped out, reviewed some stuff in different drafts and provided some good feedback to that. And so, been trying to just present an update of this assessment work to you all, and hopefully it's useful moving forward. I should also note, in addition to hunting seasons coming on, we were also issuing a lot more take for sandhill cranes through depredation permits. And so we're getting concerned with that. So we thought it'd be a good time to update the take assessment. So I'll turn it over to Mike, and he can kind of run you through what he did.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Can everybody see my screen and hear me? Okay, excellent. Okay, so just some background on sandhill cranes. Obviously, they're a long-lived, kind of slow life history species, relatively small clutch sizes, long lifespan, nearly extirpated in the early 20th century. They were down to about 25 pairs at one point in time. The planned population goal for the plan in 2010 was about 60,000 cranes. And we've seen, as you all know, really rapid recent population growth. We're looking at a population doubling rate of about every 13 years. And so this population growth has been a conservation success story, and that's brought some substantial benefits, including wildlife viewing and birding, as well as some expanded hunting opportunities. But we're also seeing substantial conflict in the upper Midwest and Mississippi Flyway around agricultural depredation issues. So for the eastern population, we've seen this geographic extent substantially increase. The panel on the left is from the 2010 plan, and the panel on the right is from the paper that we published. You can see there's a bunch of newly identified staging and wintering areas that have been found, as well as really substantial continued expansion of the Atlantic Flyway, especially in Ontario and Quebec, where we're seeing them up into the James Bay area. So they're expanding substantially to the east and the north. Additionally, we're seeing substantial population growth, as I think this is a surprise to nobody here. There's been a lot of population growth in about the last 20 to 25 years. The current index of abundance from the fall counts is about 105,000 cranes for the eastern population, and that's probably a minimum population estimate. There's certainly staging areas we're missing. There's certainly parts of the country that we're just not covering particularly well. So just to give you guys an idea, that on this graph, the black dots are the surveys for the fall, and then the 3-year is the average. We do seem to have this apparent level off in the early 2020s, and I'm pretty sure that's due to a drop in survey effort around COVID-19 issues. So as Tom pointed out, we're interested in getting a more robust assessment of what level of harvest is sustainable for the eastern population of sandhill cranes. This is really important for sustaining that expansion of hunting opportunities, as well as needing to factor in these substantial depredation take needs. We're seeing depredation take around agricultural conflict being much higher than the current hunting harvest rate right now. So basically, we're modeling the population and take limits based on some work on black vultures that Guthrie Zimmerman did using prescribed take limit. I'm not going to go through the math. If you guys would like me to, I can, but I'm just going to boil it down to we need to have a population size. So something like the fall harvest surveys. We have a management objective that runs from 0 to 2, with 0 being unconstrained population growth and 2 being trying to drive something to extinction. And then we need maximum growth rate. So this is a theoretical rate of what growth would look like in a population that's unconstrained by predation and density dependence, things like that. And we can derive that in 2 ways, from demographic data using Slade's equation, or from a demographic invariant model. I'm going to be covering just the demographic data because it's a better parameterized model, and it's going to give you a better sense of sort of what's actually happening in the populations that we know. So population inputs, we were using basically the fall surveys. We're just using the 2017 to 2023 survey totals and building a standard deviation off of those means and standard deviations. The fall surveys are just an index of abundance. One of the drawbacks of this is that we don't have any controls for like observer effort or training, and we're probably missing some of these large aggregations in the fall. But it should be a reasonable minimum population count, so we can be sure that we're certainly not below sort of a minimum number of birds, and there's probably more out there on the environment that we're not capturing or on the landscape. And then I also ran this over multiple management goals for consideration by the flyways as they're making decisions about hunting and harvest regulations. And just to give you some benchmarks of what some of those management goals may look like, I'll also call them F-naughts because that's how they're referred to in the models. So a management goal of 0.5 is usually the benchmark we use for something that's threatened or endangered, but we have some level of take that we need to make. Bowhead whales is a good example of this with take from subsistence use. For most species that are non-game in the bird world, we're using a F-naught value of 0.75. So it's not at the maximum sustained take that you could manage, but it's substantially higher than something that you set for a threatened or endangered species. And management objective of 1.0 is the maximum sustained yield. So this will basically constrain population growth and allow for the maximum amount of harvest. So we use this for things like waterfowl and other species that we want to take a lot of. You can also raise that management objective above 1, which would start reducing the population. As far as I'm aware, no one has ever actually adopted a management objective above 1, but it is one of those possibilities. And
We should
ultimately,
have
this
one for black-bellied whistling ducks that's above 1.
I think we set that at 1 for now. It may change soon, though.
Hey, y'all, this is Pam. My understanding is that the FNOT for the black-bellied whistling ducks is currently sitting at 1, based on a discussion with one of the decision makers.
Ultimately, this is going to be a policy decision, and it's going to be balancing the hunting, agricultural conflicts, and wildlife viewing issues. Just a little bit on the demographic inputs. We're trying to simulate, again, an unconstrained growth. So we're using the mean and up to 95% confidence intervals. Adult survival is being inputted somewhere between 0.95 and 0.98. That's from Dave Franzak's work with radio tagged cranes. We also looked at some band recovery data, and it's running about the same. So we see pretty consistent adult survival above or at 95%. Similarly, we're seeing strong juvenile post-fledging survival, and Todd Arnold's paper from 2016 is where we're pulling that data. The clutch size at fledging, including lost clutches, is from Fox's work in 2019, and that puts basically the number of colts that become adults every year at 0.26 to 0.38 per pair. And then the age of the first breeding, we're using the mean and lower 95% confidence interval, because the earlier you breed, the higher the growth rate, essentially. And we're looking at somewhere between 3 and 4 years. So we end up with an Rmax, so a maximum growth rate of just under 10%. And this is concordant with other measures of that maximum growth rate using a demographic invariant model. Okay, so this is what the results end up looking like. So it's a box and whisker plot with the median prescribed take level as those circles, and then the 95% confidence interval is those whiskers in black. I have the most recent annual take, which is depredation and hunting, as that solid blue line, which is just under 3,400 birds. And then the mean over the last 6 years in that purple dotted line, which is just over 2,500 birds annually is the mean take. So this is only for demographic, and then just some benchmarks in terms of kind of where those numbers sit. So at the management objective, where you're looking at endangered or threatened, you're still able to take about 3,000 birds a year. At maximum sustained yield, you're looking at somewhere around 6,245. So a substantial number of birds, but not a huge proportion of the overall population because of that low growth rate. Does anybody have any questions about this before I move on? Okay. Just to go through some conclusions, we really have some substantial additional take possible for the eastern population of sandhill cranes. I think ultimately this is a decision for the flyway councils to decide kind of where they want to be managing that population at. The one caveat I would say is that sandhill cranes in the eastern population is the same as the other populations. They don't have the same dynamics as most game species, so we're dealing with long-lived birds with small clutches, and they're going to have a very slow reproductive rate. So over-harvest can cause population declines relatively quickly. So that it's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about how you want to be managing that population. The other piece that as where folks are setting hunting regulations is to recognize that depredation is currently the major component of take compared with hunting. It's approximately a 2-to-1 ratio over history, although that's starting to get closer to a 1-to-1. In the U.S., most of the crop damage is done in the spring. Newly sprouted corn is stripped in large quantities by adult but non-breeding cranes. And unfortunately, that's all happening in the spring. So the hunting will have no direct effect on damage issues. This doesn't seem to be the issue in a lot of Canada, where crop damage, it seems to be barley being trampled and potatoes being damaged, where the hunting seasons and crop damage do align. So you could have something like a hunter getting a tag for hunting cranes and be able to kind of potentially double dip on some of those depredation issues. So what this suggests is depredation is still going to be continuing to be a relatively large proportion of that take, and that because of the relatively low growth rates or demographic rates in these sandhill cranes, we just have to be aware that those depredation take will affect the available hunting harvest. The other piece that I just want to have folks be aware of is that we could probably use a more formal measure of effort around counts and better coverage across the range. I know that Dave Franzak and Beth Rigby put out a paper in 2019 suggesting some of these changes. And that would just help us manage that population a little bit closer to that maximum sustained yield and be able to catch any declines in the population a little bit more easily. There's also just a potential that there are higher demographic rates happening at the periphery of the range. So in particular, I'm wondering if there might be higher survival rates for colts. Most of the data that we're pulling from for those demographic models was from sort of the strongholds of the range in southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and northern Indiana. And so it's possible that there are some density dependent effects occurring in those areas that may not be happening in, say, northern Ontario or a western New York, and there may be higher growth rates at those edges. Ultimately, this is a decision in terms of how we want to manage this population is going to be set by the Atlantic and the Mississippi Flyway Councils. I'm suggesting 3 scenarios. One is a relatively conservative with a management objective at 0.9. That would allow you to take a little over 5,500 cranes annually, and would provide a little bit of a buffer in case of overharvest, as well as some lower level of population growth and range expansion. If we want to manage it for hunting and for harvest, we could go to a maximum sustained yield, which would get us just over 6,000 cranes taken annually, and it should stabilize the population at about 100,000 cranes. The third scenario would be a modest population reduction, which would be taking just under 7,000 cranes annually and would likely drive populations towards that original plan goal maximum of about 60,000 cranes. The caveat on that is you'd really want to be monitoring those populations closely as they decline so you don't undershoot and end up with a population objective below that of 60,000 cranes in the plan. So just to kind of conclude, we have really substantial take possible from the eastern population of sandhill cranes. I laid out some management scenarios, but ultimately that's a decision for the flyways. Just the depredation need is relatively high compared to a lot of other game species, so balancing that is going to be something that needs to be thought about. And then some additional population demographic monitoring would be beneficial in terms of preventing overharvest and potentially higher permitted take, both from getting a better handle on how big the population actually is, as well as the potential that the periphery of the range may have much higher reproductive rates. This was published in the Journal of Wildlife Management, and I have the citation down below, and I'll take any questions that folks have.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Oh, I got hands up. Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Hey, quick question. With the importance of depredation, You know, a few
Sure.
years ago when Fish and Wildlife Service moved to the new database, we were having trouble getting reliable estimates of depredation for any species.
Still are.
You and me
Okay.
both.
That,
My understanding is they're working on getting that sorted out. I can't remember off the top of my head if that depredation, how I managed to get those depredation numbers. I just,
Yeah.
I know they were.
Yeah, I had Larry have to dig into the last
that's right.
couple years that we provided, go through permit by permit since we don't have spits anymore and weren't able to just query the data and get a take number. So yeah, but my understanding is they're working towards that and need permits, but I don't know if they're there yet or not.
My
Luckily, I
understanding
don't have
is,
to deal with that anymore.
well, I do, and
I
my
know.
understanding is they're getting close to
Yeah.
having some sort of measure figured out. So fingers crossed, we'll be able to continue to keep that up.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree with you there.
thanks.
Go ahead, Oren.
Thanks, Mike and Tom. I really enjoyed that presentation. Very informative. I have a question about the confidence intervals in the model. They seem very wide. I was just wondering why the confidence intervals are so wide.
Yeah, so there's a couple of pieces of that. Most of it is from the fact that the population index varies quite a bit from year to year, just because, you know, some years the volunteers are hitting concentrations at very large numbers, and some years they're not. So that bounces around a lot, which makes those confidence intervals very wide. And then there's also some process error in the model itself that's being taken into account. So that is driving some of that. So that's where a lot of that is coming from.
Yeah, if you remember back to Dave's project, Oren, with that mark sample that he had there, I forget, it was a pretty significant proportion of those that weren't actually in some years in the areas where volunteers are surveying them. So I think there's a lot of annual variation in that.
Yeah.
So if the projections from the model were to be used to inform like a management objective or a prescribed take, do you think that should be more conservative given the high degree of variability, or do you think it would be appropriate just to use that point estimate?
I think that we are probably undercounting this population at this point in time. I think that there's always good reasons to be conservative, especially with something that has a pretty low reproductive rate and low survivorship for the nests. But I don't think we're catching all of them, and I would guess that we're probably, especially given the growth rates are around 10% a year, we're probably okay to be using what I call like a risk neutral, where you're taking the median rather than like the lower 95% confidence interval and something like that.
That's a good question, or many things we use that lower credible interval, but in this, given what Mike, we've talked about this, Dan Collins, who reviewed this paper, has done a lot with Western cranes, thought we were being too conservative, really.
Right.
So I'd be comfortable going with the point estimate, and I think, my opinion is like that, setting that FOD at 0.9 is probably pretty good, and it, as it showed, the main thing we wanted to make sure was what we're currently taking through sport hunting and depredation permits was somewhat sustainable, and I think we were relieved to see that. We kind of thought it probably was going to be, but now if anybody questions us, I mean, we were getting a lot of FOIAs and stuff on the crane permits we were authorizing. So now at least we have the biological foundation to support the take we were authorizing. And as you can see, even if another state like Wisconsin comes on, which they've been, and Michigan's been talking about it from time to time, and and Alabama more recently came on, that even with that sport take and what we're issuing in depredation take, it's still below what we feel sustainable. So that's good. So but I would be comfortable going with the point estimate to your question.
Yeah, I would also just say that when we compared this population to the Central and Rocky Mountain population in terms of proportion of the population that might be harvested on an annual basis, and the maximum sustained yield was about the same as the current harvest estimates for like the central population. So I think we're obviously it's kind of apples to oranges because they're different subspecies, but I think we should be okay with a point estimate like that.
Thanks, guys. Great paper. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks. I'm just going to highlight that I received a notification from our USDA Wildlife Services folks, and the new permitting process is not going so well as it relates to issuance of sandhill crane depredation permits, and we have been told to expect significant reductions in the amount of tags that will be issued this year. That information has been shared with farmers, and the response is typical to what you would have expected from farmers, and that they will handle the situation as they see accordingly. So just giving you guys a heads up that this appears to be an issue, and it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. JB, you had your hand up.
Helps unmute yourself. Great, really great presentation and great information. I guess the thing that I'm most kind of struck by is the narrow kind of window in the level of harvest between growing population and declining a population to 60,000. You know, like I mean, if I remember right, this year, like your next to last slide, there's 6,800 a year. You've got a declining population, and 6,000. You've got a growing. You know, it's a pretty narrow window for us to try to hit.
Yeah, that is we went over that a couple of times, and I think what it is it's really being driven by that colt survivorship in those nest depredation not issues, but you know, the natural nest depredation and colt survival. And that's one of the reasons why I brought up the periphery of the range, because it seems unlikely that they'd be growing this fast without higher survival somewhere. So it could be that we're seeing effects in Wisconsin that aren't present in other parts of the range.
So I'm trying to remember from back when I reviewed. Are you using some of the papers out of Wisconsin on poult survival and nest success and things like that? So that, yeah, I remember that with the Crane Foundation, what is his name? That had done,
Fox was the lead author. I can't remember who the lab was from.
You're talking about the guy from ICF that when we started the hunting,
Archibald
was citing some stuff from the core of their range is what their population demographics
they have really
were.
really low reproductive things, and when you question them, it's like the highest density nesting area for sandhill cranes in the world, and basically they were fighting over territory so much that nobody was successful. But when you looked at what Fronsac did and what we did in Kentucky, the number of poults, number of colts coming south, or sorry, my old turkey days keep getting me. The number of young birds, 1 in 10, 1 in 11 of the birds, that we're seeing in the south are young birds. So the reproduction is clearly better than what some of the studies were saying anyway.
Yeah. I remember us talking about that. Grungies, Jeb Barzin.
Yeah, I think Barzin's number, and Barzin's, if you use Barzin's number, 1 in every 400 birds in the south would have been a young bird, but we were seeing 1 in 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation. I will. I have to ask, since you mentioned that you compared this to the mid-continent population and the RMP population, and didn't mention that the harvest take level is similar to the RMP. So I'm curious, is this considerably lower than what the RMP is at right now?
I'd have to look at the discussion because I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think the proportion was we were taking 9 to 12%, kind of depending, and I think it was like 14-ish% in. I really have to look at the discussion again. It should be in there, but we're in line. I think one of them was a little bit higher than ours, and the other one was a little bit lower for like maximum sustained yield. Let's see. Oh, I have these numbers way off. Hang on, I just pulled it up.
Yeah, I'm looking here quick.
Mid-continent takes about 8% of the spring population every year, and then the RMP is about 6% every year, and we're hitting about at maximum sustained yield, we're looking at just over 6% for the eastern population.
That seems I don't need to go down the road, but I mean they're I think they're harvesting quite a bit higher than that in more recent years, and that population's kind of continued to grow. But so anyway, we can talk more later. I don't need to devolve the discussion.
Nate, the latest harvest estimates for RMPs about 1,700 a year, and that population is, between 20 to 25,000. So yeah, it's definitely a lot less proportionally than RMPs are being. And that's where Dan was coming from when I mentioned earlier. He's like, you guys are being way too conservative here. So we actually changed some things based on his input, and that bumped that number up a bit from where it was initially. But
10-4.
Yeah, no, certainly I think we tried to err on the side of conservatism with this paper, in at least the starting place. But a lot of good questions as you all think about potentially updating your plan on, like Mike said, it's really a flyaway discussion. We were hoping to give you at least an updated glimpse of what the population looked like and what it may take. But I certainly up to you all to come up with what you think is appropriate for that population. Which, as we know too, it's tough to define it anymore, with some of the other work that David Wolfson did, after Franzak, there's a lot of mixing with mid-continent birds now. Actually, this might be of interest to you all. We just had a call last week about combining the RMP with the lower Colorado River population based on a lot of Collins's work showing that they're really the same population. So we may be updating that RMP plan and adding that group of birds to it in the next iteration.
Awesome. Thanks, both Tom and Mike. Do anybody else have any questions? The only thing I'm going to highlight is that my plan is, again, to work with both Mike and Tom and potentially David Wolfson on a similar thing for trumpeter swans. And so the goal would then to get an idea of how we could incorporate that into the management plan moving forward. And so more to come on that.
Just as we finish it, we're getting ready to go again, right, Taylor?
Perfect. Exactly. I haven't even got all the signatures yet. So here we go. All right.
Thanks for the time, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much.
If I hang around, or you guys got
absolutely, because I might call on you to when we talk about AHM task force and stuff. Dave and I and Adam can't remember, so.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're going to be talking banding at all, but I might have some updates you guys are interested in there. So.
I don't think we had it on the plan, but we'd love to hear about it.
Perfect. Well, John, I think the next topic is the AHM task force. So between you and Adam, you guys want to kick her off?
So Adam, I know Adam was not able to be at the last task force meeting, but he was there for the Harvest Management Working Group meeting, and I think that's probably the better place to start. I will say that the last harvest management, we had a virtual call the other day. There is a lot of stuff that's coming, and it's going to be coming to you guys sooner, probably rather than later, for some input on things. And so, I'd defer to Adam if you want to just talk a little bit about some of the things we discussed in Arizona, or not.
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest thing that you all should probably know is that we spent a lot of time coming up with management alternatives, so potential ways to approach AHM moving forward. And a lot of those are revolving around what we call sort of guild bag limits or high and low harvest potential species as two separate bag limits rather than more complicated single species harvest strategies, right? So we came up with, I don't know how many are on that list, but there's a fair number on that list. We're going to sit down on May 11th and talk with Shannon and Luke, our two task force members, and go through those and get their impressions of those. Anything that they think could be cut from consideration, anything that they think that we missed that need to be added for consideration. Also, I guess it bears mentioning that my understanding is, I mean, as John said, I was unable to be on the call, but the plan I know was to go through a bunch of things that we considered and immediately discarded as possibilities, things like status quo with no monitoring, that kind of thing. So I don't know what that discussion looked like with the task force, because again, not being there, but maybe John can fill us in there. But again, yeah, the biggest thing is just that we're working on management alternatives now, and we're going to sit down with the task force members in a couple of weeks and talk through those before the call on Wednesday, the 13th of May.
So I guess to Adam's point, we did cover lots of things from status quo leaving exactly the same to a number of things. And we, like he said, we just discounted many of them because they weren't reasonable. One of those would be something we called it the upland model. Come up with a number and just hope that it works out and kind of go with it forever unless somebody complains. So we went through a number of those things. One of the things that became kind of apparent at the task force meeting is that we may need to dust off one of those really super simple conservative, I mean, not conservative, well, those really simple plans to add it to it, because there are certain people that want to have things be as simple and least, what's the right word? Most efficient as possible and least costly as possible. And so there may be, maybe I guess bringing back up that something like the upland bird plan or something like that, we may have to kind of at least address that for the task force to make them happy. That's sort of right, Dave. Tom disappeared real quick when I started talking about that.
Yeah, you guys, or someone may have affectionately named it the Jerome model, but yeah, I mean, the whole point was to have a range of, things to compare to status quo in terms of the computational complexity, the monitoring data streams, and those types of things. So that was all starting to get spelled out. That was where Boomer did a lot of talking and telling us what we would need.
It's incredibly all the things that are being discussed it's a lot of analytical capacity. There's going to be a lot of things needed. There was a lot of discussion about how do we bring the university world in and get them involved in taking on certain parts of this, how we get people, make sure like people like Mike Runge is involved. One thing the tech section may hear is, we from the Eastern Ecological Center, whatever it is, the USGS has told us a million times that, hey, we're here to help if you need anything. Well, we may ask for help from Runge because he makes a big difference on some of this stuff. But one thing to also kind of that you should see sooner rather than later, there is a memo that's coming out from the task force that highlights the first year of progress of the task force. And so again, that memo basically talks about our fundamental objectives of sustainable populations, maintaining the hunting tradition and maximizing efficiencies, and then talks a little bit about some of the next steps and where we go from here. So I expect by the middle of next month, by the time the task force meets again, that this will be finalized and will be something that you guys have seen. And again, that at some point the councils and tech sessions are going to be asked to think about some of these potential options that Adam talked about and how you guys feel about those. I think one of the most interesting things to me was from that Harvest Management Working Group meeting in Arizona is that the Central and the Mississippi Flyway were almost exactly on the same page. I mean, I think what we were interested in and how to move forward seemed very, very similar pathways, which doesn't always seem to happen these days. So I thought that was exciting. So beyond that, there's task force I really feel like is making progress, and it's been a really good and the Harvest Management Working Group is there's been every other week a call, I think, and work being done, and so it's this thing is full speed ahead. Unlike some of the things that have drug out for years and years and years, I don't think that's going to happen in this case. We'll see, though. We're coming up on summer. I think the last call, Boomer, kind of indicated that his time is about to become really, really hard to come by. So any questions about that? Hearing none, good. So next, I guess, Reed, is Reed here?
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, did you want to, before we go to Reed?
Yeah, just really quickly, I just wanted to mention that everybody who sent me monitoring costs information, I sent that to Conniff this afternoon. So thanks for your contributions, and hopefully that gives us a little bit of credit for stuff that we're doing and that overall picture of waterfowl monitoring.
I guess one other thing, Reed, before we start on you, that an interesting comment from Conniff or somebody at the meeting is that they have, I think it was Conniff, that in the review, some of how they do surveys, that it almost sounded like they had decided that they were going to no longer do plain surveys of the prairie pothole region, that planes would only be used for the boreal type stuff, and that everything in the prairie pothole region would now be 4 square mile plots. And so that, to me, just struck me as a really major change without a whole lot of input. But here's Tom going to tell me that I heard that wrong. So
there's been some preliminary discussions between Conniff and Heath about, the Eastern Dakotas potentially looking at using 4 square mile to get BPOP there. There aren't 4 square mile plots in the Western Dakotas, east of Montana, the ground crew area that I run. And but we've been working with Heath to potentially test some data collection along those transects. It's not very spatially explicit. We're just tying ducks to a north or a south of a transect or air ground segment, but we're going to probably next year start carrying iPads and spatially explicitly capturing that information. So those are early discussions, and that's one efficiency potentially to bring to the BPOP survey and the traditional survey area, but a lot of work and talk yet before it goes that way. But it sounds like word travels fast.
It just, the way he described it, he was like, it looks like we could do this and we could only get by with only 5 pallets, and it felt like in his mind he had decided that this is the way it was going.
Yeah, I don't know if it's there yet. I think Nick may be on, and I think they just gave maybe a presentation, it sounds like, to the NSST today, and this was discussed a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it was discussed. I gave a presentation, and happy to actually give it to this group as well. There's a lot of options being discussed, and really, yeah, like you said, Tom, word travels fast, and there's absolutely nothing set in stone. But it sounds like from an air ground component, Happett would like to, or well, we would be willing to take kind of operational control, and it sounds like you and Heath have discussed that, but there's several other options, like for example, using the 4 square mile survey ground data in a model-based VCF correction, similar to the how the ESA is done. And so that's being discussed. And me and John Yiser have there's been preliminary discussions on how that would work in the model-based framework and in this multi-speed frameworks that they're pursuing. And then there's a couple more extreme options, one of which integrate both data sets. I think John in particular is most excited about that prospect. 4 square mile survey extends into Minnesota, but we obviously don't have anything, or at least not long term, over West River. And then Mark really shocked us when he suggested that, hey, maybe the 4 square mile survey could stand in the U.S. prairies, and that they could reallocate effort. So those are just alternatives and hypotheticals. None of which, to my knowledge, are concrete. I know John is incorporating now our data into many of the simulations and models. So that's about where it stands at this point.
Yeah, and this is all part of the larger waterfowl breeding population habitat survey review that's going on that Mark did that webinar a month or so ago for y'all. So many
that sounds a lot better, Tom.
Yeah, many, no decisions have been made. Okay. It's purely exploratory, as Nick said right now.
Yeah, you should expect us to be exploring lots of efficiencies. But certainly no decisions have been made.
I think that's wonderful. Again, the way he kind of stated it, it just grabbed me as like, oh, have we decided this already?
No, far from it, JB.
Okay. All right, Reed, I'm sorry, man. I just got sidetracked. And Taylor, you wrote that down, right? That we're talking to Nick's gonna be a soon presentation for us.
Sounds good.
All right. Yeah, well, thanks. I guess I really don't have much unless Dave or Tom know more than the email I got, but it looks like Steve Olson kind of formed a committee for the RocketNet propellant. And so it's got people, basically the banding committee people from every flyway on it to kind of start talking and meeting about how we want to approach the RocketNet propellant issue at hand. They're still waiting on a quote for the propellant cost, and then I think the idea is once we have that, we'll schedule a meeting with the group to discuss and start forming options and hopefully have a path forward come the meeting in September.
Yep, you guys know when I did my update in Nashville that we outlined where we are, when the supply is going to run out. We had a little conversation about different options, and we had indicated that at some point going forward, it would be good for the various flyways banding committee folks to get together. And so Todd asked Steve to organize that. I gave him Reed's contact information. Even though they haven't met yet, they'll look for an opportunity between now and probably have several calls between now and our summer meeting so that we're all in a much better position to see what the flyways think we can do and what would be our best path forward, and then we can make informed decisions. So Rita, I'm sure, will just give us monthly updates as they're available as we go forward.
Yep.
Before you move on, just since Reed's on and kind of this is related to banding, Region 6 Migratory Bird Program is going to fund the full ask we have to support banding on refuges in the coast, including Sand Lake, Arrowwood, and Jay Clark, which you guys run. So that's great news. Got that news a lot earlier than we did last year. So I don't know, Reed, if you I forward you the final thing from Samantha there, but she said everything will look good and they'll work to get that loaded into and sent out to those refuges. So that's good news.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's all I wanted to stay for. I'm gonna probably hop off now though. Good seeing everybody and yeah, take care.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
See you, man.
All right. I think with that, the only last topic was just the one that we've been kind of holding on here. I have an email to WMI with regard to the SharePoint thing, and that's about as far as I've gotten. If I don't get a response here in the next week or so, I'm going to specifically reach out to the folks in the Atlantic Flyway to see who they have talked with on this, because the way WMI currently has it is it's go to their site and send in a thing via a comment box, and so I don't know how frequently that is reviewed, but like I said, if I don't hear anything shortly, my goal will then to find someone who actually has a source at WMI to have this discussion. Nate, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there was also a rewilding the Atlantic Flyway mallards on there.
Sorry, I pulled
got
up the
him.
wrong agenda.
I got him. I was going to let him go finish
Yep.
his SharePoint thing before I jumped in on that.
Yep, I had the wrong one.
Dave sent me sometime back in March an email from who it is Pat Devers, I guess, from the Atlantic Flyway. And I just decided it was best just to mention it here because there's nothing, I guess, is really happening with it at this moment. But it was a proposal in the Atlantic Flyway from a group of academics, hunters, whoever they're basically wanted to create a project to rewild, quote unquote, rewild mallards in the Atlantic Flyway. And their plan was to collect 50,000 wild mallard eggs from the mid-continent region, incubate them, and release them over a period of about 5 years. So that plan, basically the idea is that, all the captive reared mallards going out there are European genetics or captive duck genetics, and we've discussed here many times. We have lots of concerns about that. But this don't believe is the solution. So the solution is just stop releasing damn mallards into the wild and call it good. But anyway, I just want you to be aware. They're basically, at this point, it is not, Dave, can you help me out here? It's not gone anywhere, right? It was just it was something that was presented to Atlantic Flyway, and they did not pass a recommendation or submit any kind of letter of support of the idea.
No, I don't think there's any support for it, and I would just share it so you'd be aware, but nothing is happening. Hopefully nothing does happen with that.
The reason people captively raise the mallards that they raise is because they've been bred to reproduce quickly and do well in captivity. So they're not, the people that are selling mallards to game farms are not going to switch and start selling and raising birds that are harder to raise and all that kind of thing. So I don't know. The whole thing is just a little bit crazy, but anyway, I just wanted everybody to be aware that it was out there and that you could potentially hear about it. Sounds like a good thing for our brother Dave Rave to get behind, and can supplement mallards by releasing them in the wild.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, this is the proposal. I brought this up a couple of meetings ago that Kaminsky was fishing around looking for mallard eggs from birds in hen houses. Yeah, it's Phil Lavretsky and Jim Anderson at Clemson are leading the charge on this. And I did get the statement from the Atlantic Flyway that they had, basically said, we are not going to endorse this and we're against this philosophically. And I'll just say, they asked Minnesota for eggs and we said, not a chance, and that won't change. So, but that's it.
So I don't know, is that, I mean, they would have to have a Fish and Wildlife Service permit to collect those eggs, wouldn't they? So,
Not
I don't know,
happening. This is kind of like, flooding corn. It's not the solution to another problem that somebody raised, and going out and collecting eggs and releasing mid-continent mallards in the Atlantic is not the solution to the problem they've created.
I think we all know enough at this point that anything you raise in a pen is just not going to do well in the wild. Okay, so I think that maybe then does cover most of our agenda. Taylor, any last minute, anything else? He's shaking his head. No, Jamie. I see Jamie with his hand raised. He's going to tell us something.
No, I'm gonna tell you something and then ask something. So I got an email yesterday from our wildlife health person who said that within the state of Tennessee, they're talking about doing some investigation to understanding PFAS accumulations in animals in Tennessee, and it's good for animals that don't necessarily travel over long distances, and you can kind of pinpoint things. But she was curious if there was any interest at all with testing waterfowl for PFAS, and if anybody's doing it, if anybody's interested in doing it, what do we think about it? And, obviously, if in the winter we test a bird that's collected at a hunted area and test it for PFAS, we have no idea where that bird, came from. Maybe, unless it was banded, maybe. But I told her, hey, good timing. I'm talking to the Flyway folks today. I'll ask them, anybody got opinions on that? And there.
Yeah, I'll just address Wisconsin. We currently had, I think, 70 samples from hunter harvested birds from the Bay of Green Bay, of which I presented to you guys that we had a consumption advisory. So I don't have any of those results yet, but I've given those birds. Additionally, UW-Madison requested that we pull a breast feather from these birds because there is some potential for looking at PFAS levels from feathers, so you wouldn't have to necessarily kill the bird because right now it's breast muscle. And then, again, Amy can elaborate on, I think our next objective is to identify a suite of places across the state of Wisconsin at which we would collect birds during banding to get kind of an idea of known areas of potential PFAS contamination, and then in those same areas or throughout the state of Wisconsin, likely look at more hunter harvested birds to see what the impact of birds that are potentially consumed, how many of those have PFAS versus what the local levels look like. So again, that's Amy, did I miss anything? I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, so we are starting a new project this season, collecting waterfowl. I was thinking about asking y'all if you wanted to give like a presentation about it at a later meeting. I can go into more detail potentially, but one of the things we are interested in is seeing if there's a relationship between surface water levels and what's found in the breast muscle tissue of the birds, to kind of, it's pretty expensive to test the birds. And so if we can utilize any kind of existing data on surface water to kind of point us in a direction of like, okay, where should we be testing birds? We thought that could, save money as well. So that's another thing we're interested in.
Amy, would you be okay with me giving our wildlife health person your contact information if she wants to talk to you more about what you guys are doing over there? Would you be okay with me? Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I'll chime in for Michigan. In 2021, MDARD, so our Department of Ag, collected samples on 60 birds. I'm actually just now working on the final report for that right now, so very fresh in my mind. These were not sampled at sites that we have like PFAS contamination advisories, and they were banded or were with banded birds. So we've got 2 sites around Grand River or around Grand Rapids and Lansing, at our banding sites where they capture or they took some samples there. Um, you know, I'd be happy to share, especially once this is finalized, share that report. I think some of the conclusions in here we're still a little struggling with because it's hard just because there's, at a site, like one site specifically, there might be some PFAS contamination. We know that these birds are flying around. So like, how do you actually set any contamination advisories for something that moves so far? And we did try, or they did collect like surface water PFAS levels too, but they didn't collect them at the same time that they collected the birds. So one, I guess, note for you guys, if you're going to do that, to just like collect water samples that day. I think these were like 3 months later. So really hard to draw any conclusions there.
Awesome. Thanks, Callie. Bruce?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. Minnesota, I know last year we collected some PFAS samples from a known area of PFAS contamination, and they also collected some birds from our other banding operations in other places to serve as some control measures. I don't have any of the output from that. Our wildlife health folks are doing that work, but I can put anybody in contact with our folks in wildlife health that are working on that if you guys want.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. I see Jamie nodding, so probably expect something. Sam?
Yep. Hold on one sec. Oh, here it's on. If you guys have any presentations, environmental issues, would love to hear about PFAS at some point in the future. So please let me know when you get something presentable.
Thanks, Sam. Jamie, do you have what you need? Perfect.
Yeah,
All
no,
right,
I
JB.
appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Just one last thing, check. Pam's been here all day. Pam, you just hanging out with us, or did you have something you needed to talk about?
I'm just hanging out with you all because I love you all so much.
We love you too, Pam. All right, sounds good. Any last comments? Any last things? Oh, Ariel has her hand up.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Lisa and I are looking for ideas for either topics or speakers for the Lucanen seminar for next winter's meeting. And so if you have ideas on subjects or people, please reach out to Lisa and I. Thank you.
I think Dave Rave might be available if you need.
Only if he leaves Arizona that one time. So
that's a saving grace, isn't it? Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for another good meeting, and we will see you guys next month.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thank you.
See ya.